and welcome to I Should Say That Out Loud. I'm your host, Donna Brandell. I am a late recognized, late diagnosed adult woman with autism. That's a mouthful. But this podcast is my opportunity to say all the things out loud that have been in my mind, locked up for a lot of years. And I've learned that saying the things out loud that are on my mind result in positive things happening in my life. So here goes. I'm going to say that out loud. The more I learn about autism, the more I have to say about it, especially when I interview people about autism and being on the spectrum. And today's guest is no different. I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest, Jackie Schuld. She is a therapist in a private practice, and her specialty is art therapy. She doesn't just serve people with autism, she serves the general population. As you'll hear from her story, she is also a late diagnosed woman on the spectrum, and she has counseled a lot of women who either didn't know they were autistic or were also late diagnosed as well. It's a very interesting path for us women to learn about being on the spectrum, and it's just always so fun to talk to another woman who's in that same boat. Jackie is not just an art therapist, she's also a very talented artist as well in many different ways. She creates paintings and drawings, and I'm sure many other things that I'm not even aware of yet, but she's also an author of a lot of books. And I have ordered 3 of them so far. One of them I've already given away because it's so good and so beneficial for people going through grief. And that one is called Grief is a Mess. The other ones are Making It Through Chemotherapy, which she talks about in this episode as not as, she doesn't feel that she did as good a job on this book as she did on Grief is a Mess. But after reading through this, I still think it's a very excellent book, having gone through chemotherapy myself. So this is an excellent book. She uses animals and drawings, but these books are not written for children. They are great to use for children, but they're also great for adults as well. So Making It Through Chemotherapy is one of my favorites of hers so far. I have a lot more of hers to order and read to catch up on, but the other one I have is Therapy Private Practice. And I'll talk more about this one as I work through it in future episodes. So without further ado, here is Jackie Schuld and my interview with her. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I had so much fun, as I usually do. But please share your comments and feedback. Subscribe to the podcast so that you can be notified of future episodes. And I appreciate you so much for listening and sharing my episodes with your friends and telling people about my podcast so that we can spread the word and help other people learn about autism and how to cope and enjoy life with autism. Thank you so much. Hello and welcome to Jackie Schuld, who is an autistic art therapist. And I met Jackie through LinkedIn and just sent out a message and invited her to be on my podcast. And I'm very excited to invite and introduce you all to her and learn more about her and what she does. So welcome, Jackie, to I Should Say That Out Loud.
Thank you for inviting me. And I liked the name of your podcast. Forgot to tell you that, but yeah.
Thank you. I'll ask you later what you would like to say out loud that you sometimes don't. Unless you want to share it now.
No, I'll wait.
Okay. If inspiration comes, you can just pipe in. So just tell me a little bit more about yourself, how you got into art and art therapy, and what your days look like.
Sorry, that's many questions at once. I
Oh,
do
sorry.
not. No, it's okay. It's okay. You just might have to remind. I can't
Oh,
hold
yeah.
multiple questions in my head at
No
once
problem.
very well.
No problem.
But maybe I'll start with your last one, which was what my days look like. So I'm an art therapist and I run my own private practice that specializes in autism. But I just went on sabbatical. So what that means is I'm taking a break from therapy for 1 year. And that literally started last week. So my days are so different now in that I do my best to keep them unplanned so that I can creatively do whatever I feel like doing, which is typically painting or writing, or sometimes I'm just out and about exploring. Like yesterday, I went to a writer's group just to see, like, ooh, what is this like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds so freeing and thought-provoking.
Yes. Yes. It was inspired by, I did a 1 month sabbatical last year from therapy, and it was so fun. It was just like the most freeing, like I just couldn't believe how good it felt. And um ever since then I've been wanting to do try a longer sabbatical and kind of squirreling away my money to make it possible. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. I'm excited to hear what happens a year from now.
Yeah, thank
Love
you.
it. Yeah.
I know it might be nothing. It might be like Jackie slept. Which is fine. Like I think rest is good.
It cracks me up. So many people just need that alone.
Ah, no kidding. I have been sleeping a lot, so
Awesome.
yeah.
That's great. Well, congratulations on your sabbatical. I'm so glad you're still able to do this interview with me today in the midst of
Yeah.
that.
I consider this fun. So this is not therapy work.
Oh, good.
Because therapy work, that makes it sound like therapy work isn't fun. It has its own fun component,
Hmm.
but it is definitely emotional, mental work for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So
And compassion fatigue, I'm sure, is a big deal with what you do.
yes, especially as an autistic, it
Yeah.
uh yeah, a lot of times it does, you sit with things quite a bit that you're like, whoa, whoa. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So what drew you to art? How long have you been doing art?
I mean, I've been doing art since I was a kid. Just so I grew up making little books and just drawing. Like a very autistic thing. I was obsessed with beavers, the animals, and like I just drew them
Huh.
over and over and over. So like just things like that. Um but then I never considered studying it in college. I don't know. I know one thing actually is that at the university I went to University of Florida for my undergrad, and their art program was very protective. Like you weren't allowed to minor in art, you weren't allowed to take art classes, like they wanted. So I think that prevented me from exploring art more. Saying a lot right now, sorry. But so as I say it, so you were asking though how I got into the art and art therapy. It was after I graduated that I met an art therapist and was like, oh, this field exists. This is cool. And eventually went back to school to become an art therapist.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. What kind of art is entailed in art therapy? Is it painting, drawing, writing, all sorts
It's
of?
all those. It's every kind of art. And what we do in a session is tailored to the client. So for some clients, I might feel like they need some rhythm, like some like to like maybe pound out their anger, or like maybe I'm feeling like no, paint would be really good because they can like flow with it. Or also I have to consider things like comfort level with different art materials that the client may or may not have, and so I'm factoring that in, as well as I like to use things clients are excited about. Like if they're like, I've never done clay, I want to use clay, then I definitely want to bring in some clay, stuff like that.
Very cool. Do you work with children too, or just adults?
I don't, in my private practice, I only work with adults.
Okay.
I used to work with teens in the past, but in private practice, I really feel I need more of a team, because so much of working with teens and kids is also working with parents, and you need more wraparound support, I would say, than I feel I can provide in private practice.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's just me. I should be clear. My private practice is a practice of one.
Yes.
Because there are practices that have a group of individuals, but I have no intentions of expanding simply because I just don't think it's. I know many autistics that can do that, but for me, I just think that I would not want to take on that level of responsibility or stress.
Yeah. That's good that you know that of yourself.
Thank you.
I sometimes don't know myself well enough until I try something. I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I wrote an essay about something like that called I Expand, Then I Contract. And same thing where I feel like, oh, let me try this. And then I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. And I'm like, oh, let's bring it back in, Jackie. Bring it back in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Really quick, I wanted to anyone visually watching, I wanted to explain I'm just doing some embroidery while we talk because often as autistics it helps us to be fidgeting in some capacity or doing something with our hands that helps calm our nervous system. So that's what I'm doing.
What are you working on?
I'm just writing my husband's name.
Oh,
I sound like a little teenage girl. I'm like,
I love that. So romantic. Can you tell me a little bit more about the painting behind you? Because I just keep looking at it and it looks like something to me, but I don't know if that's what you intended it to look like.
what does it look like to you?
It looks like a city.
Oh, yeah, I can see that, like the road maps and such.
Yeah.
Okay, this is funny. It's actually for me intended to be like looking into a forest.
Ooh.
Now, I get that it has no forest elements like leaves or whatever. But in a forest, when you look at it, you see both the close up and the distant at the same time. And so that I was trying to get that layered component of like, okay, some things are really detailed and up front, and then some things are really vague and far away. And yeah, that's kind of what my inspiration was, but I don't expect anyone else to look at it and think forest. So don't worry.
Very green city, like a very
Yeah.
naturistic city. That reminds me of an essay that I've been thinking through my head of writing. And I saw that you're looking for writers for your next book in your series. And then
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what would I write about? And then now I'm thinking maybe I would write that. So my idea is to write, because a lot of times when I'm trying something new or learning something new, at first,
Hmm.
because I visualize everything when I'm speaking or thinking, and at first the visual in my head is very fuzzy, and so I'm thinking it's like an impressionistic image until I learn more about it, and then it becomes
Ooh.
more realistic of an image. If that makes sense.
It does. I'm like you're speaking my language. Yeah. So for anyone not knowing what we're talking about, there's I'm starting I'm starting a new book called The Joys of Being Autistic. Since so much of the literature about autism is about the challenges and quite frankly, as autistics, that's often like what's right in front of our face. And so I wanted a chance to focus on the positive things that being autistic brings us, as well as looking at it from a bit of a different lens. Not trying to make this like toxic positivity or deny any of the other things, but just that something to like I think I wrote about this in my call for artists to say kind of to have a breather or something that we can turn to when we're just in that dark place and need some hope or just to take a pause from how hard things can be.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking of contributing, Donna, I would love to have you.
I would love to
So
contribute.
yeah.
Thank
Oh yeah, I didn't even say that. So like I'm trying to have this book will be different than all my other books because I'm inviting other writers to contribute.
you. Yes.
Um, oh, Donna, you said the things you shouldn't say out loud. So wait, how does it?
I should say that out loud.
Oh, I should say that. Sorry. Yeah, I should say that out loud. I was thinking in my head the first time I read that was I shouldn't say that out loud. It's not funny. But kind of have something tied to that in I actually don't think I could write this book by myself. And that's a little sad for me to admit
Hmm.
that because most of my books are about 30 to 40 essays that I compile on a topic. And I think I would really struggle to get to 40 essays on the joys of being autistic.
Wow.
I certainly experienced them, but I'm pretty sure I would just be saying the same thing over and over and over again. There's not, for me, a wide enough range that I experience.
Yeah.
And so I really do genuinely need other voices
Yeah.
and other perspectives
Sense.
on it. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you're collaborating with other people and helping more people be involved. That's a really generous offer that you're allowing for us to do.
Thank you for seeing it that way. I do have maybe a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, but I essentially wish I could be compensating people better for contributing because I believe so strongly in paying people for their work, and especially as autistics, it's so hard to make a living that feels good.
Yeah.
And so I'm offering $50 for people who submit, a 1 to 3 page essay, which I wish it could be more, that to really show like, hey, I honor your work, but my budget, my budget is what it is.
Yes. I love how you described it, and I wrote this down in quotes because I have all sorts of projects that are similar, self-funded passion project.
Yes. Yes.
I funded
Well,
lots of passion projects over the years that didn't really do much for me.
yeah. Yeah, typically my books don't make, it's not a living wage for sure. We'll say that. I'm a therapist and that's how I make my living income.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, if it's okay, I'll put the link to the call for artists into this
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
description.
For anyone listening, you have until December 15th. Get on it. I actually purposely, though, made it really soon because I know we as autistics, it's hard to hold many things in our mind. And I knew if I did something far out, people would forget. And so
Exactly.
I thought if I put the deadline soon, people would be like, oh, get on it. Do it now.
Yes. I try to hold more into my mind than I know I can. And yeah, definitely. If I don't do it right away, it's going to be gone.
Yeah, me too.
So I will put that link in the show notes. So you have quite a few other books as well, and I ordered 3 of them. I'm excited to receive them because I'm very interested in the topics. So maybe you can tell me a little bit more of how you, about the books and why you chose the topics. I'm sure there's a really good reason, and I'll share a little bit of why I'm interested.
Okay.
But grief is a mess, and then making it through chemotherapy, and then the therapy private practice.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, because I was like, which books are we talking about? So, yes. So, Grief is a Mess was my first book I made, and it's an illustrated book for adults about how messy grief is. And I made it about my experience of watching my mother kind of succumb to cancer, essentially, and then dealing with the aftermath of her death. And don't worry, the book isn't that depressing. It's not about like those exact experiences, but it's capturing Grief is a Mess is looking at the messy emotions, the messy physical impacts of grief, the way it impacts relationships. It's just looking at like what a hot mess it can be after someone dies.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I was autistic when I made that book, but looking back, I'm like, what an autistic book.
Yeah.
Because it was like I was trying to make sense of things and clarify things, which is what an autistic mind craves is clarity, understanding. And so I was like, okay, what are the emotions? What are the physical impacts? What are the mental impacts? I can see it, what I was doing now, but I didn't know that's what I was doing then.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So,
sense.
yeah. So, yeah, that was definitely a heartfelt
Mm,
book, and one that I don't like. They say your first book will always kind of like hold a special place, and I think that one will. It has,
mhm.
it ended up shaping so much of my life
Wow.
in that, in unexpected ways. I self-published it, but because of that book, I got hired at a local high school to teach like how to make books.
Oh,
And then they hired me as their art teacher. And then when they wanted me to become full time, part of my negotiation was they paid for my master's program in art therapy. So like it's just crazy how like
wow.
you never know where your creative longings and
Yeah.
dreams will take you. Like, and that's one reason I don't always like to set concrete goals for my life, because I often feel like life shows up in so much more like magical and unexpected ways than I could ever dream. Like I could never have like predicted that weird zigzaggy path,
Yeah.
but I'm delighted it happened.
And even though you said you don't make very much off of your books, look what that one book did for your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
Like I mean a master's program is like 150,000. So yeah, like I definitely did not make that much from my book, but kind of did
yeah,
because of
yeah,
making it.
so
Yeah.
cool. And I love that because I know looking back, I've had a lot of people naysay a lot of my ideas because it doesn't fit in a box and it won't like produce the income and all these things. But who knows what it could have done in a
Yeah.
roundabout way like you experienced.
Yeah, I mentioned I went to a writers group yesterday,
Mhm.
and I had asked the question, like, how do you decide which project to pursue or how to, put out it's funny, now that I've been on sabbatical, my words are like way more jumbled. But anyways, um, like, how do you essentially like decide how to divide your time on different projects? And one person was like, well, just look at your books and see which has the biggest audience, which is going to make you the most money, and da 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 da. And I was like, ugh, I didn't say this out loud, but inside I was like, what a horrible way to, ugh. Like,
Yeah,
but it was, I mean, that was good clarification for me in my head to be like, okay, well, definitely not
yeah,
drawn to that,
yeah.
and more to like just what I'm
Mm,
excited about.
yes, I agree. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So then,
And
making it through chemotherapy.
yeah, it ties to that because that book was about my mom's experience of going through chemotherapy for 6 years. And that book wasn't as driven by passion. It felt like something I should do.
Mm,
And it was painful making that book. Like it was hard, and it's not a book I'm as proud of. I think it was a really good learning experience for me that one, Jackie, just don't do shit that, oh sorry, I don't know, but like don't do stuff that you're drawn to. And second, I realized like it was almost like how there's primary sources, right? And secondary sources.
mhm.
And I was making a book about my mother's experience, and I realized I couldn't do that as well.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
Grief is a Mess was about my grief and the grief I directly experienced. But chemo, I did not directly experience chemo. And I saw how that made it harder to access the emotions, or I illustrated it as well, like to capture things.
Yeah,
And so that was also a learning experience that for me personally, I do far better when it's something I directly experience.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I forgot to ask for the grief is a mess. So would that
Hmm.
be applicable for anyone or just for people who are artistic?
It was definitely made for anyone.
Okay.
In fact, I made it for adults, but the biggest purchasers of it now are like children's grief camps who will buy it in bulk for like 600 copies, and like it's like, whoa, did not expect it to be used with kids. But again, I understand now because it's breaking down in really simple terms, this is what grief can look like.
Mm-hmm.
And like the illustrations, I use animals so that you can identify with any. I didn't want it to be gender or race based. I wanted anyone to be able to look to a picture and be like, oh, I feel like that hamster.
Yeah.
As well as they're supposed to be a little funny, so that it's a book mixed with, yeah, this is hard, but also like, haha, that's a little funny.
Yeah.
So some of the cartoons are humorous on purpose.
That's good. I'm looking forward to getting it and reading it. And probably sharing it with lots of people, because I know some people who struggle with grief. I think everybody does.
I will say it's been a nice thing to have when I know someone who has someone die. You know, I can, and they're not in my, immediate life. I take one of my books out, write them a letter, and stick the book in the mail. And it's kind of a nice thing to be like, I don't really have the words, but here.
Yes.
Like,
yes, that's beautiful. So then therapy, private practice.
Yeah. So after my lesson of my second book, I didn't write anything for 2017. So yeah, that was I didn't write anything for 6 years because I was focused on getting my master's and kind of waiting for like the enthusiasm. And that's what happened with that book, is that I started a private practice. And everyone told me I couldn't start a private practice. It was the craziest thing because I was new to the field. And there were there were so many opinions and there wasn't really a book out there that was like some clear guidance about, hey, here's what's possible. Yeah. And so I decided to write like my experience and encourage people that like you can do this, and it is, well, one, legal and ethical and even better for you. And here's why. Like, I think the mental health field it's this really weird mix where like you would think we'd be like this loving bunch of people to each other, but really we're very judgmental of other professionals in the field. And like, you can do this, you can't do that, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, that's ethical, that's not. And it's just a lot of lateral violence that occurs. And I'm going off on a tangent, but point being, I want to be a voice in the field that's like, take care of yourself, and here's what's possible, and here's like, I don't want to shame or scare people into things. I want them to feel an expansion and some relaxation and some like, oh, I have opportunity and choice, and I'm not trapped in a demanding field that's going to drain the life out of me.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what that book is about.
Yeah, and I love that you're like the opposite of the naysayers. Like, no, yeah, you can totally do this, and here's how I did it, and go do it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I already asked you about your Joys of Being Autistic book. Talked about that. That was next on my list. So can you tell me a little bit more about how does art and art therapy help autistic people? More specific?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously it helps any person, but since we're autistic, we're here talking about autism. More specifically, I think a lot of times as autistics, we're feeling and thinking so much all the time that it's, sorry, my Egon is like, my dog is like right here being like, pet me.
It's okay.
Do you want to say hi to the audience, Egon? This is Egon.
Hello, Egon.
So my little fluff ball wanted to participate. So back to how it can benefit us is that since there's so much happening, one, we need space to put all of that, so that there's one, just the value of expression, but second, to process all of that. Yeah. And whether that be through writing or through making a painting about it, or we really need the time to let things percolate. Yeah. And art does that really well. as well as art helps us see things we couldn't see otherwise. And that's usually like a day or two after you've made a piece of art. Sometimes you're like, oh,
Ooh,
wait a minute. Or like with my clients, I can say like, hey, did you notice this in your art? Or I see this pattern happening across your art. And like, it's just another way to access kind of what's happening inside of us.
yeah, that's very cool. I love that.
Yeah.
It makes me think of like I want to try some kind of artistic expression to help me work through um, the issue of confrontation. Because in one of my
Mm.
classes, I had to list my strengths and weaknesses in group leadership, and one of my
Hmm.
weaknesses is confrontation. And I don't really know how to improve that, but maybe some art therapy would help me improve that, just to see
Yeah.
where the what's that word that doesn't want me to do it.
Yeah. Like in like, so if I had someone like that and someone like you in my practice, we do things probably like collages about that and see what like images you're drawn to for that topic. Or, depending, I'd have to get to know the person better, but look at kind of capturing the emotions present in confrontation. Just like there's so many things to explore, which is one thing I love about art is I guess what I was saying before about the unexpected and magical of life. That's also what art brings us is like, oh, I didn't like I've made things before that I was like, whoa, I didn't know I felt that strongly until I was making the piece of art and I was like, that is dark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, so that is very helpful to understand. Um, I already asked what ages you don't serve children, but is it like all ages, young up
Um,
to
18 plus.
okay?
Yeah. So really it's just I don't work with minors since again I want more wraparound care, like help with all members of the family are usually involved are involved, right? Like a teen or a child can't make all of their own decisions.
Yeah, right.
So
I was wondering before I asked you if you serve children or not. Can this be done either in schools or in families? Like, can parents even facilitate this with their children if they're kind of stuck on something and just kind of come up with a project with their children to say, okay, you're struggling with this issue. Let's do this art project to see if it'll help you.
um I mean I'm always a fan of art, but I would caution that doesn't make it art therapy and to be careful because you have to be ready for what comes up.
Mm,
Like art, like a lot of times I have clients make something and brings a lot of emotion to the surface. And I mean, and that's why we're in therapy, right? So then you have a safe place to discuss that and look at that and hold that and process
mm,
it at a pace that you can digest it and that it doesn't put you into overwhelm or something else. So yeah, I probably wouldn't encourage parents to go into like deep subjects.
mm,
But I mean, always like art, like
yeah,
if you're upset, go paint a painting about being upset. Cool, like something broad, but
yeah,
definitely would not try to like therapize them through art.
that's a really good point. I'm glad I asked, and I'm glad you shared honestly. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you in our last 5 minutes, you shared in one of your LinkedIn posts that you've experienced things like living in multiple countries and changing career
Hmm.
paths.
Hmm.
What was it like to live in multiple countries and which one was your favorite?
One thing I loved about living in other countries, because I lived in countries that weren't English speaking, was that just by going out on your day-to-day life, like you're learning, like you're absorbing the language, you're like, it was, so even just sitting in a coffee shop, like I lived in Madrid for a while and just sitting there listening to people speaking Spanish, I was like, "Oh, I'm learning Spanish." I
Oh,
mean, obviously you need to practice it, but really you do like learn so much better just by absorbing it.
hmm,
So that was one fun thing, just as someone who loves to learn, I liked that, as well as people were always so kind to me. I think they recognized,
mm,
like, hey, you're not from here, and it must be a little disorienting to be somewhere new. And people I was lucky, were always really good to me, and it being my friend or just showing me around, kind of embracing me. And I wish I'd done a better job to stay, not stay in touch, because I don't even know how but like have a way to maintain contact, because I
Yeah.
wish I could like write them now and be like, yo, I really appreciated that. Hope you know, and come visit me now.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So if you're out there and you met me, you have an open invitation.
Cool. Beautiful. Maybe something mystical will happen out of that.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah. I'll let you know.
Awesome. And then you said you changed career paths. You kind of talked about that a little bit. Like
Mhm.
why and your process, and are you glad that you went through that journey?
Yeah, I mean, and that was me switching to art therapy. And I after college, I just bounced around for a long time, knowing I wanted to quote unquote help in some capacity, but not knowing how. And by finding art therapy, it was like, oh, what a fun way to like combine all my interests into one. And so I'm very grateful that I found it. Though
Mm-hmm.
I strongly suspect it will not be like my career the rest of my life. That kind of like the magical unfolding of life. Like I'm sure I'll have many different iterations and directions, and like I've appreciated it thus far, and like I'll see where it goes.
I love that is not rigid, set in stone. And I think we can do a better job of teaching children and, teenagers about just paying attention to what's happening in their life rather than like you have to go on this path and this is what you're good at and like that.
Right? Or this idea that there's one true career, you have to find your one passion.
Mhm.
And it's actually something a lot of my autistic clients struggle with.
Mhm.
And I usually talk about just doing the next best thing, like what it, and like taking the pressure off of this has to be your whole life, but more like, hey, what are you passionate about right now? Try it out. Do you like it? And just taking it one step at a time. And I think for an entire decade, I tried different things. Like for 1 year, I tried like a job, and then I was like, not really for me, and switched to something else. And that might terrify people, but it's what got me here to so much like freedom and flexibility in my life and a career that's very meaningful to me. So I wouldn't take that back. And I don't think fast forwarding and putting pressure on myself to find the perfect career would have made it happen any faster.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And one more thing I forgot to ask you was you mentioned that you weren't diagnosed autistic when you wrote The Grief is a Mess. How did your
Mhm.
diagnosis come about?
Um, I was seeing an art therapist, and she suggested I might be autistic. And I was like, I don't believe you. But then I started reading more about autism, and I was like, oh, this. And then I finally went for an official diagnosis.
Is there anything else that you would like to share before we conclude and say goodbye?
Uh, I was thinking the other day about like what gets me most excited, and the thing that came to mind was getting other people excited about their own art, or their like if I could just be encouraging to others to like reignite something they're interested in, that like I don't know what it is about that, but I'm like, make more art, yay. Like it's just so, I love seeing what other people create, and I love seeing people just like doing their thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess I know like whoever's listening may not know me, but make your stuff.
Oh,
Like, please. So, yeah.
that's that's what you should say out loud. I'm glad you said that.
Oh, I like that. Nice, circuitous.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for taking time out of your beautiful sabbatical to talk with me and get to
Yeah.
know you a little bit better and share your beautiful art with the world and your beautiful, gracious thoughts. And I'm excited to see what will happen as a result. Um,
Thank
and,
you.
and yeah, a great, wonderful year. And I'm hoping that we'll be talking a lot more throughout that year because I just
Yeah.
had so much fun today.
Thank you. I did as well.
Thank you. Well, have a great, wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you
All
again
right.
soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.